Well, everybody, I just want to welcome you to my review of my Kemper Profiling Amplifier, which I have now had for 1 year and 7 months. And so I thought now would be a good time to sort of give you my feelings about thinking about the amplifier now that I've had it for such a long time. And I was amazed by that. I looked at the receipt in my email and realized it was that long, and thought I should do a review on it. So what I'm going to do today is just go through some basic stuff that I go through when I'm playing at home and recording. I don't do a lot of stuff with it that a pro would do, which is probably serves this amp a lot better, you know, in the hands of a professional. And I'm definitely underpowered as a guitarist as far as using it, because this is and I'll share that later about what this thing can do for a pro. But first, I'm going to talk about what it's done for me as a guitarist. I realize there are different technologies that are available for digital type guitar stuff, and like the bias amp. Let's see here. Bias amp, virtual amp designer by Positive Grid. I've heard that, and I thought it sounded great. And I think a lot of digital technologies and profiling, not profiling, but modeling amplifiers are out that are very fine amplifiers. And so I'm not against any of those technologies. I chose Kemper because I thought about it for quite a while. Those a few years ago, and I saw a video by Anderton Music where they compared the Kemper to a few other amplifiers, and they couldn't tell basically the difference between the Kemper and the amplifier that they were attempting to choose in a blind test. And I couldn't really either, and so I thought that was pretty good enough. And I've always been favorable of various digital modeling and now this Kemper profiling technology. When I got into digital guitar devices with the Zoom 9002, which I think was around 1990 or so, and you can look that up on the web. It's a really interesting little device. Had analog distortion and compression, and then digital effects like EQ, and it had echo and reverb, things like that. And then I got into the Line 6 pod, which I was never satisfied with. I never thought that thing sounded good, and I enjoyed it. It was easy to use, but I just never honestly liked it that much. I've never felt satisfied with it. So sonically. However, the Kemper is amazing to me, and every day, like I say, every day I'm amazed by it. Every day I play this thing, I am completely amazed by how it sounds. And I'm not really going to demo the sounds today, but you can look at my other videos for some of the sounds I'm working on demoing through this. But I will try a few different sounds so you can get a feel for the adjustments and how they work. So right now, what I'd like to do is just run through some of the things that I do in using this amplifier. We'll start with how, turning it on. What is that experience like? So I'll just shut it off. And so right now it's shutting down, and it shows you it's shutting down, and it shuts down pretty quick. It takes a little bit longer to come up. So if you walk up to the amp and you turn it on, and I turn it to the browser position because that shows the amplifier settings. There's also the tuner settings and some other settings that I'll show you that I don't use. But as you can see, it's booting up here, and it takes a little while to boot. But if you're a pro and you're setting up for a show, this is inconsequential because you'll have the amp up and running for the show. So this shows you the software update, and it shows you where to get software with a URL address there. And so now we're up, and this is the Music Man by Brit profile, guy in Nashville that does profiles for Kemper amplifiers, and we will talk about the profiling process, which is different from the modeling amps later. I'll explain that later. So I like to have a little bit of echo and reverb on there when I play, just to kind of have a little bit of fun. And there's a little delay knobs right here that you adjust the feedback and the mix. So you can see it on the dial down here, where you can adjust the feedback, just like how you see a dial. It's very variable, and you can be very careful with it. So you can, slow down and hardly move, or you can go very fast, and the slider will move very quickly. So it's very sensitive to your kind of touch. So so there's feedback, very high, and there's feedback low, and I just like a little bit, and maybe a little less delay, just a tiny bit, and then some reverb here, which is the same kind of slider. Okay, and there's many different kinds of reverb and many different kinds of delays. So that's how you change some delays and reverb. You just kind of spin the dials. How you choose, if you wanted a different reverb, for this reverb here, it says reverb. There's a button up here that says reverb, and so you hold that button down, and then this window changes. So you hold that button down, and this says ambience, which is what I like. I like this ambient type of sound. Well, they call it ambient. It's not really like big and treble-y. It's kind of like I don't know. I like that. So, but if you want to do a different kind of reverb, you just spin this dial here, and let's make it into a big hall, or hall 1, medium 1. Okay. See, that's a little bit different kind of a... So, but if you want to go to a different type of reverb, let's see what we got here. We got a matchbox sproing. I don't even know what that means. Okay, so that's matchbox sproing. Anyway, so you kind of see how you can just press this button up here, the reverb button, and go in there, and then you can change this reverb to whatever you like. And I happen to like one that says ambience 2, and I usually use that on everything. And there aren't too many reverbs on this. It could be more reverbs on it, I guess, but they're very high quality. So, and there's a delay up here, and if you want to change, you exit this screen here with this little exit button. You just hit the exit, and then if you want to go into the delay's up here, and that applies to these knobs here. That's all in the manual. I'm not going to go into deep. I'm not going to go in deep on that. But this shows you all the settings you can possibly make for this one called a dual delay, and there's hundreds of them. There's hundreds of delays. They're just amazing kinds of different delays. And you can change different note values, and there's 5 pages of different things you can change with this delay. I usually keep it pretty simple. That's just the way I like it, so I don't mess with stuff too much. So over here, we turned it on, and we went to browser. Okay, so there's other settings too, like the tuner, and that puts it into this mode. And if I play a note, then you get this little kind of level type bubble, and it's very sensitive. I don't know what the sensitivity is on it, but it's pretty sensitive. And when you put it back to browser, that's where if you want to play the amp and just choose different amps to play. Perform mode has something to do with performing, obviously. And I don't know anything about it. You can do stuff with it. Like, for example, I believe you can take the foot pedal they have for this, which is very expensive. I think it's $500, but it's quite involved, and you can control a lot of things with this, and it has a pedal on it, and you can do different kinds of wild things. So that's what that's for. So again, this is something I'm not using as a player here in my room. So I don't use it. So, and then there's the profiler setting here. That is so you can profile amplifiers. In other words, maybe this would be a good time to explain the profiling process. Profiling is different from a modeling amplifier. Modeling amplifiers use various signals, work on modeling the signals in hardware and some software that amps have by building them up, in software and various measurements. The profiling amplifier kind of does the same thing, except that the way you do it is you set up your amplifier, your actual amplifier, and you mic it up the way you would mic it as in a studio. And then you use the Kemper amp to put a bunch of weird sounds through the amplifier, and the Kemper amp measures those sounds through your amplifier, and then it creates a profile of your amplifier. Okay, and what that profile is a sonic slice through the sound of your amplifier in that particular situation. So for example, if you have a Shure 57 microphone and you have another microphone, some AKG microphone, and you have it set up a certain way, and you have a certain kind of speaker, and you have a certain kind of amplifier, and the settings on the amplifier are set in a certain way, and the treble's at 6 and the bass is at 4, and I don't know, whatever you have it set as, it will take a snapshot of how the amp sounds in that situation. And then you'll have that on the Kemper, and that will be really good for that situation. But if you walk over to the amplifier, the real amplifier, and you move the treble or you move the microphone, well, then that would be different than the profile now that you had just taken for the Kemper. So in the software that I'll show you later for the Kemper, you will see that there are thousands of profiles, and sometimes people will take many profiles of one amp. This still doesn't mean that they're taking a copy of the amp. This means that the Kemper Profiler is amazingly good at taking a slice through the sound of an amplifier and saving that slice, kind of like a hologram in a sense. I mean, it's not really a hologram, that's a bad word, but in that situation. Now, so now that you have that, like this Music Man amp by Michael Britt, you can play it, and I've played Music Man amps before, and some of them sound very, very similar to this. So you get some really nice sounds through it. You do have bass, middle, treble, and presence controls, but you have to realize that these controls are not exactly the same as the Music Man amplifier. And so they do adjust the bass, bass region, and the middle and treble and presence, and they're quite effective. But, they're not they're not there to perfectly mimic every amplifier that exists on the face of the earth. And that's why an amplifier that you have in your room is different from the Kemper, because it's going to react to its the way its tone controls are designed, versus however a Kemper affects the signals that it is processing with these bass and middle and treble controls. Now, there are a bunch of effects in this thing, like equalizers and a bunch of delays and treble boosters and distortion boxes and all the kinds of things that a digital type amp would have, and they're easy to access. Over here, sometimes I will run things, and lately I've been running mostly a treble booster with a lot of things. Like this has a treble booster on it, a slight treble boost, just to give it a shine. I've never really had a treble booster as a pedal, and Brian May uses one. I always thought, well, that's really cool. And so I've tried it, and I really like it. A little bit of it, not too much, to make it too bright, but just a little, and it makes it, gives it a little bit of a shine, and that kind of cuts through a little bit, and I really like that. So, the boost here, you can just, like we did over here, you can just hold down on it, and then now you're in the treble booster, and there's tone and mix and ducking, and which is a whole new thing, the whole thing I haven't quite figured out. And, various things like that. If you want to change it, you use this knob again over here, and the browse knob, and you just go through and you just choose a different thing. Like there's some chorus, you can choose a chorus, or there's a hyper medium. We'll choose a hyper medium chorus. What does that sound like? Pretty good. I like that. I'm not really a chorus guy, to be honest with you. So I'm going to go back to my treble boost default, which I think is what it was, and choose that. And I don't like 4/4. That's too much for me. So I'm going to turn it down. And then I'll say exit. And then if I want to save this, this is something you can look up in the manual. There's a button here that is store. And you just press it twice, and then that saves it for that setting. And you can also save it as another setting with another name, which is, a little bit difficult, because in order to save it as another name, you kind of have to roll through the letters, and it's not a keyboard thing, and it's kind of a little bit messy. But I don't really do that much. I don't really care. And there are a lot of things you can do with this amp. There's all kinds of buttons. I don't know what they do, and it hasn't really bothered me that I don't know. And that's about the front of it here. Let's see. There's a volume down here, which I pretty much never touch. I'm not sure how that works. There's a master volume here. I use that all the time when I'm recording, so I can set the levels. And let's see here. And rig, I don't really know what that does. And this controls the amplifier here. And this is amplifier, EQ, cabinet, and stack. And if you hold down like an EQ, you can get different EQ modules. You could roll through them, I guess. Oh yeah, look at that. You can have different EQ modules. They not too many actually in this situation right now. But and then the amplifier, you can do stuff there too, which I don't do. You can read about it in the manual on the Kemper site, because they have the manual for this amplifier up there. So give it a look, and that's about it. We'll talk about the back of the amplifier here in a second. Okay, now we're looking at the back of the Kemper Profiling Amplifier, and this is where I run into something that I'm not really happy with, and that is the amplifier in here. Now, it's a 600 watt amplifier. I don't know if that's RMS or what that means exactly. It's very loud, though. It's a very loud amplifier. It's great. Fantastic amplifier. However, this amp has a stereo output. Mono input for the guitar, but output, all the effects are stereo effects. That means that the echo bounces left to right, and the reverb is very stereo-like. However, the amplifier for this amplifier is mono. And that was very upsetting because I paid for the power amplifier, and it's a mono amplifier. I've never understood that, and I've heard them talk about it. Like, I never really investigated it after I got disappointed about it. So if you do buy the Kemper amplifier, I would highly recommend, unless you want to play through a mono cabinet output with the power out of this thing, I would not recommend getting the power amp because it's not stereo. There are manufacturers that you can buy stereo amps for the Kemper that fit inside this cabinet. I think this is a Class D amplifier that has a lot of power, is what it is, a clean amplifier that simply drives the signal. But if you don't care and you want to just drive a big mono cabinet like a 412 or something like that, or an 812, this will do it. This has a lot of power, so that's fine if you don't care if it's mono. I do. It's got stereo outputs, and I'm like, come on, So then it's got all this other stuff like return input and alternate input and direct output, and it's got buttons on it that say ground lift and that help with, I don't know, they drop the third little thing on the mic cord or something, and it makes it, possibility of less noise. Not really sure. I'm not really hip on that, so you can consult the interwebs. And SPDIF, I have no idea what that does. SPDIF in and out, it's digital, but MIDI. I guess that would be this the MIDI control for the foot pedal, and maybe something else. I'm not really sure. And here's the you can use pedals with this thing, like volume pedals and things like that. And here's a USB stick where you can use that to boot the new operating system. I think you can install that on the USB output here too, or input output. And then you also have the power here, and then you have main outputs. And I use XLR cables going into my sound device, and so I don't use the regular cables, but you could. And so that's about it for the back. Okay, so we're going to talk finally about one thing that I haven't actually done. Actually, we'll talk about two things. One is just a quick, you see these different colors. You might see these different colors on the video of the LEDs and this thing right here. That's because you can set that in the system, and you can set the LED colors for the various LEDs, and so I just enjoy doing that. Another thing I wanted to talk about is something I heard about with this amplifier that kind of demonstrates some of the capabilities of it, is that you can have a volume pedal and set it in a minimum position and have a bunch of settings set, like echoes and chorus and various things and distortion levels, and assign these things to the pedal in MIDI all at once. Okay. Then push the pedal all the way to the all the way forward from being all the way backwards, and set your settings the way you want to have them all at maximum. Okay. And then you can use the pedal to morph. They call it morphing, at least on this technology, this amplifier. They call it morphing, where you can go between all these settings with one pedal push. So basically, if you wanted to start out real clean with a little bit of echo and this and that, but you wanted to have chorus and heavy a distortion come in later with a big echo at the end, you know, or I'm not the end, but the big echo, well then you just push down on the pedal to the middle or however far you want it to do, depending on the performance and what you're doing. So it's really interesting that way, and there's a lot more capabilities than that. So that's about it for my Kemper amplifier, and I have to stress again, I can't say enough good things about this amplifier. I'm very happy I bought it, and I have nothing bad to say about it. So this is the Rig Manager software used for the Kemper Profiler Amplifier. And over here you see a list of different categories of profile types, I guess you'd call it. I have it focused right now on the Michael Britt profiles, which are ones that I primarily bought. Some of them are free, offered by Michael Britt. Michael Britt is a very popular profile creator because his profiles are great. So over here you see his name, you know, the profile kind of category is MBrit for Michael Britt. And then over here you see the name of the profile. Now this doesn't necessarily match the name of the amplifier. It's just a name given for the profile that represents the which amplifier it is, kind of an overall, just a name, just a general name. And you can see down the list here, there's all kinds of different amplifiers that he has profiled, and there's many more that he has also done in his really nicely laid out studio down there in, I believe, Nashville. So in this case, we have what's called a 62 Lux 2, and this is when it was created in 215 at that time, and this is the gain setting on it, kind of relative gain, and this is the name of the amplifier, and that's the cabinet name. Now if you go over here to the inspector, you can either hold your mouse over it, have basically the same information, or go over here to the inspector and see what Michael Britt and company put as the information for that profile. So it will list the amp name and the cabinet name with possibly the speakers used. In this case, the Celestion CL80 speaker in a 212 speaker configuration, and the microphones used. And in this case, the microphones were 57, a Shure 57. 57 is the industry standard term for a Shure 57 microphone. And the Fathead, which is another type of microphone, Fathead 2. So when somebody does a high quality profile like Michael Britt, they generally put in all this information about the situation in which the amp that they are profiling with the Kemper has, as far as speaker and microphone and everything like that. Now if we go over to the Rig Exchange over here, there's 11,603 profiles in the Rig Exchange as of right now. This is a listing of profiles that users have created and added to the Rig Exchange on the Kemper Rig Exchange site. Okay? And they have a varying quality regarding their profiles, and some are very good and some aren't so good, and you can see that information up here in a couple different ways. One is I kind of look for, well, are they going to tell me like this person did? Are they going to tell me which mics they used? Are they going to tell me what speakers they used? You know, it's stuff like that. It may or may not be important if the profile sounds good, but if you go over here, you can see the crowd rating. And I have it set right now, so it's set to very high crowd rating, and also shows the number of votes. So if it has a high crowd rating and several people have taken the trouble to actually vote for the profile, it's a good indication that you may have a profile that sounds pretty good. Sometimes you get profiles that don't sound very good. They don't tell you what microphone they used, and it's some person in who knows where that just shoved a microphone in the room and did a profile, and that's not the way to do it, so you get good sounds. But there's 11,000 profiles, and there's a lot of good ones in here, so you could spend probably a lifetime going through and finding the really good ones. For me, I have probably 4 profiles total that I use all the time, mostly just for my own playing, my own satisfaction. And on the Kemper amplifier, there is a section for favorites, and in there I have put my favorite amps. And in my profile overall, all the profiles in my particular amplifier are 491 profiles. And you know, you can see those in the list here. So these happen to be the ones that are on my machine. I'm not committed to these, they happen to be there. Some of them I really like, some of them I don't care that much about. So up here we have the menu items, and they're very simple. They are here for the file. You have import rigs, and that's like the Michael Britt rigs. If I buy some rigs, I can import them. I can export them onto a USB drive or somewhere else, I suppose. I haven't really done that. I haven't done any backup. And for the edit, it's very simple. Edit commands that are usually used in Windows in this case. Some other commands for tools that can be used. Again, very simple. And you can make a new window if you like with the same information in it. For whatever reason, maybe copying back and forth or something like that. And then there's help, which has quite a bit of information actually, and different user manuals in different languages. You can find support for your Kemper on the web and various things here. And that's it for the rig manager for the Kemper Profiler.